What's up everybody, it's me, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a Valorant 6.07 tier list. Over the past couple of months, we've seen the meta truly settle and a number of changes that we have to point out, talking about the weakest and strongest agents to play right now. But starting it off, we gotta start with the D tier agents. And I wanna make this clear, while these agents are not seeing any pro play at all, you could still perform well with these characters in rank, but I would consider these characters low on the utility scale and high on the solo carry impact scale. There's 4 in this category. First off, let's talk about Reyna. If you're far and away the best player in the lobby, yes, Reyna can definitely deadlift a game, but the majority of games are not going to be this way. And most of the time, Reyna is going to be a character that doesn't provide enough utility compared to many of the other options. In a similar way, we have Chamber, Yoru, and Phoenix all in the D tier. While these characters can be incredibly powerful for ranked as a potential solo carry, when we look at the pro meta, they just flat out see no play. And the reason that is because the utility is just not powerful enough when you look at the game from a strategic side, instead of the hyper simplified click heads point of view that you see in ranked sometimes. I think if any of these characters had a chance to move up in tiers, it would be Yoru and Chamber, but it would take specialty and a very specific meta, maybe a couple of buffs along the way. Now moving on to the C tier, these are characters that are either untested in pro or meta play, or they're very situational on the maps that they are optimized in. First off, let's talk about Neon. Neon is a bit inconsistent, and one of the biggest things that you need when you're playing a Neon is you need a composition built around her. For ranked play, this is going to be rather difficult, but at a bare bones level, you definitely need to be playing Breach with her. Now, if you have agent mastery over her, you could play her very similar to many of the D tier characters where she's trying to solo carry a game. But for the more strategic side, both Fracture and Pearl are decent maps for Neon, assuming that you have an initiator to set up your plays. Next off, we do got to talk about Brimstone. Now, there's nothing wrong with Brimstone right now. I think Brimstone's perfectly fine. Unfortunately, the map pool doesn't really fit him all that well. Fracture is his only real map that he's seeing play right now. And once Bind comes back in, I'm sure he'll bump up a tier or two. But next off, we do got to talk about Gekko. And I'm putting Gekko in the C tier primarily because this character is untested. It's already seeing a little bit of pro play, and we're seeing an experimental phase with the character. And I do think this character has a lot of potential, but of course, until we know exactly what that potential is, this character is just fine. I think that it's a lot easier to get value out of many other characters right now, and once we have a blueprint for how we're supposed to play this character, perhaps it will be easy. And that's why I think it's too soon to tell on Gekko. Currently C tier, I could see the justification for at least B tier and ranked, and perhaps even A or S tier later down the line. But for now, we're erring on the side of caution, putting Gekko in that C tier. Still, an amazing character that you can get extra value with by learning ahead of the curve. Players don't really know how to play around a Gekko right now, and you can use that to your advantage. Last up on the C tier, we have Sage. Now, Sage is still going to be really good in Icebox and Split, but it's really hard to justify picking her over many of the other agents. There's just so many good agents right now that it becomes incredibly difficult to just narrow down, especially the Sentinel slot, to just Sage. And while I do think that she has a strong argument to be played on some of these maps, she isn't one of those characters that is versatile on every single one. I do think that for ranked play, she's fine on the majority of maps, but you're really sacrificing a lot if you're not playing many of the best Sentinels right now, and I do think that Sage is overall a bit underpowered compared to the rest. But now we gotta move on to the B tier, and these are characters that are legitimately strong and see substantial amounts of play, but they're not necessarily played on every single map, or some teams actually prefer them while others just simply do not. Now, the first character that we got to talk about is Harbor. A little bit of an underrated pick, and honestly a very powerful one. Very good as a secondary controller on a number of different maps, including maps like Pearl. And while Harbor is incredibly powerful, one of his weakest aspects is that you need him as a secondary controller, not a solo one. Harbor brings a lot of utility to the table if you play him in this category, but many times in ranked, if you're stuck with a solo Harbor, you just don't have enough LOS denial to truly make great side executes. I do think that Harbor is incredibly underrated, powerful in both ranked and pro play, and honestly, just a buff or two away and this character could take over the meta. The next character we have in the B tier is Cypher. Now, Cypher has made quite a bit of a resurgence ever since his buffs quite a few patches back and Chamber being put in the doghouse. Cypher is seeing play specifically on Split and Fracture. While this character has a ton of potential, one of the biggest problems with him is that he feels sometimes like a gamble to pick. There are certain characters that really just shut down all his util. Characters like Raze and Sova can just deny it out of nowhere. And there's so many characters that can destroy his util that if the opponent happens to pick a composition with agents that have that capability, you feel like you're being directly countered. And that's one of the fears about Cypher, but on those maps that he's good in, I think he's good enough to see substantial amounts of play, and he does in pro play. Now, the next character that we have in this tier list is Fade. Now, Fade is still hurting from the Prowler nerf. Prowler is a little bit too easy to counter, and it makes it so she's not as reliable of an initiator, especially when there's so many more competitive options. I think that she's still a very strong character, and she does see a decent amount of pro play, but it's really hard when every single initiator feels like it could be viable for different reasons, and Fade is kind of left in the B tier as a character that can be good, but there are many other initiators that make a strong argument to be played right now. Now, the last character in the B tier we have at the top of the list, we have Astra. Both on Split and Pearl, this character is queen, and Astra just has some crazy powerful utility. Now, we are seeing a bit more success with her with a double smoke setup with her and Viper, but still, by herself, she's providing a ton of utility and power to every single team. I think that for coordinated settings, of course, Astra's going to get a bump up, so while she is B tier with pick rate or maybe even low A, for ranked play, it might be a bit trickier, and you could probably put her lower down this list. Still, though, if you have a good duo or trio or coordinated setting in any way, Astra all of a sudden becomes amazing, and I do think that this character is worth learning as a controller that you're supposed to whip out in these specific situations or with a designated duo, and you could definitely rack up some easy wins. Now, we finally have entered the A tier. These are characters that define the meta. Very pronounced in their pick rate in pro and ranked play, capable of affecting an entire game based on their utility. These are characters you don't want to sleep on. And the first character that we have is Breach. Now, much like many of the lower tier characters, one of Breach's biggest problems is that he's map specific. Haven, Fracture, and a bit of Pearl, Breach can be played on all these characters, but the difference between Breach and many of the other characters in lower tier is that Breach is one of the best characters to play on the maps that he's picked. On Fracture, Breach can just have a crazy amount of impact. Haven, same thing, where you could take aggressive control on defense to take control of many of the areas on the map. On the maps he's good in, he's like a slam dunk, but for many of the other maps, you probably don't want to touch him with the 10-foot pole, but still, he justifies himself enough to be in this A tier, and I don't think that he's going anywhere anytime soon. Next up in the A tier, we have Sova. Due to the recently small nerf as of 6.07, it's going to be a little bit easier to counter some of his utility. It's easier to see, but all in all, Sova is still strong. Unfortunately, though, the map pool is not favoring him. With maps like Breeze leaving the map pool a while back, Sova took a huge dip in pick rate, especially when he doesn't see any play on Split. Sova is still very powerful, and even when the map pool doesn't favor him, he's still an A tier agent, but of course, if the map pool was better suited to him, he would most likely be S tier. The next character in A tier is Viper, and Viper is just a staple of pro play. Now, Breeze is still a map that is out of the map pool, which definitely favors Viper, but she's still very strong on ice, and she sees a lot of double controller play in the pro scene with characters like Harbor and Astra. Now, for ranked play, I think that Viper is always a character that controllers should know how to play at the very least for the maps that she's needed on, and just like we see consistently, Viper's gonna have some maps that she's basically a must pick, and then some maps that you don't want to play her at all on. Now, the next character that we got to talk about in this video is an up-and-comer, Skye. Skye has been shooting up the ranks, really cementing herself as one of the best initiators in the game. Really good in a number of different compositions and playable on just about every single map. And with Bind coming back into the map pool, Skye is going to be even better, seeing substantial play on that map. I do think that Skye is one of those characters that trades utility for information when you compare her directly to Kayo, and it's going to depend on what your team composition wants, which character is going to be better overall. But I do think that Skye does a great job at both doing the jobs of an initiator, helping to take space, and gathering information the same way that many of the recon type initiators do. Now, the last character that we have in the A tier is Raze. Now, Raze is still good, even though her boombot got nerfed a while back. Raze did take a hit, but she's still phenomenal. While there are going to be some maps that favor her, of course, she is generally good on the majority of maps, and I do think that she's one of the best characters for taking space in the entire game, being able to have that mobility to double satchel to a certain area and clear out many corners, at the same time having extra versatility by being able to clear out certain cubbies. Raze is just a character that provides something very unique and powerful in every single game she plays, and as such, she's the top of A tier, and if we were doing this based on purely ranked play, she would be no doubt in the S tier category. Now, the last but certainly not least, we have the S tier, and these characters define the game. They define how the meta is played, and they really warp the entire tier list around them. That's how strong they are. At the bottom of the S tier, we have Kayo. Now, Kayo is just an all-rounder. He's good at freaking everything. His utility is really strong. Knife gets you information, and it gets to deny a ton of different abilities. His flash allows you to play as a secondary duelist a lot of the time, taking advantage duels or denying line of sight to operas posted up. I don't think that any composition would ever be that much worse if you just subbed out a character for Kayo. Kayo is just kind of amazing, but a lot of the pop flashes are going to be a bit better with some amount of coordination. Still, even for ranked play, Kayo is a freaking nightmare to deal with at times, and Kayo is, of course, dominant in pro play, S tier for sure. The next character we do have to talk about is Jett. Jett is just the best space creator right now, and it's not even close. She takes control of an entire round, pushing herself onto point, clearing out corners, forcing advantaged engagements, and of course, whether it's ranked or pro play, she has some of the highest carry potential out of any freaking character. Now, while Jett is strong, she is anything but easy. You're not going to be gifted any freaking kills on this character. While you do have some amounts of advantages in certain duels, you don't have any flashes or anything that's going to give you a fundamental advantage, and unless you coordinate with an initiator, then you're not going to set up those, and you're just going to have to out-aim people. The most versatile controller with a ton of pick rate on almost every single map is Omen. Long distance smokes that regenerate and blinds that can set up team engages. He just kind of does it all. And as a dome smoker, it's really hard to beat what Omen brings to the table. Not only that, but for ranked play, he's probably one of the hardest carry controllers in the game. And I do think that Omen is kind of in the sweet spot, being really powerful, fun to play, and meta in pro play. Basically, Omen is just him right now, but that's still not the best character in the game, because at the top of the S tier is Killjoy. With Chamber's fall from grace, Killjoy quickly filled that gap, and Killjoy is just amazing. On pretty much every single map, Killjoy sees some amount of play, just a really powerful character that brings a ton of baseline value to any team. And really the biggest strength to Killjoy is it allows you to greed for map control on defense. Killjoy is worth more than one person's weight in holding an objective. And yes, you lose some amount of versatility on attack, but it just doesn't matter when you get so much amplified power on defense. Being able to greed means that you're going to just win more team fights where they have to either push into a Killjoy, and Killjoy is a nightmare to push through, or they have to push into a stacked other side of the map. And of course, with lockdown, whether you're retaking or even just trying to take a map on attack, you have really powerful utility to do so. And most of the pro meta is centering around the power of Killjoy and strategies around trying to beat enemy Killjoy setups. Now, if there's any agent you think we misplaced, definitely let us know in the comments down below. Press that like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and we'll see you next time.